What's up, Slick Talkers? This episode is brought to you by our friends at SendSquared. If you are struggling with finding a tool to do direct booking campaign emails or to communicate better with your travelers and guests, well, then SendSquared is here to help. Let them know that Will sent you from Slick Talk, and they're going to hook you up with an amazing deal. Now, we're back to the episode. All right, Slick Talkers, this episode, again, is very, very special. Welcome to this episode with Benjamin Gross, one of the co-founders of Minty Living, based in Atlanta, Georgia. And man, this was an incredible conversation. We go longer than typical episodes you'll hear on Slick Talk, but this conversation is a wide range of areas in our industry that are crucially important and becoming more and more top of mind within operators on both hotels and vacation rentals. So I hope you enjoy this conversation where we go into siloed technology, the ability to be consistent at scale, and the lack of being able to do that. We're seeing successful cases in our industry. So welcome, Benjamin Gross, to the podcast. Let's begin. You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Wil Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin. Benjamin Gross, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you as we got to geek out not only virtually preparing for this episode, but we also got to geek out a little bit in person not too long ago in July. So how are you doing again, my friend? Doing good?
I'm doing well. I'm doing really well. Thanks for asking. It's great to see you again. I love how our conversations take a lot of turns from industry to meaning of life, and I welcome for whatever comes today. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Will. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, for the Slick Talkers out there, be prepared because we are taking every corner, every turn as fast as possible. I am an F1 motorsport fan, so that's the only way to do it, right? But Ben, I want to start off with two things, and this is a way of me giving you some flowers because you married a designer, an artist. Sidra is amazing, and getting to talk with her at the retreat when we all met in July, one, was incredible, but two, I also noticed she might have rubbed off on you. And I think you are a man of style, and I don't know if you got there on your own or if Sidra was the vessel and avenue for you to become a man of fashion. But I gotta say, I was looking at your guys' website and I noticed something. You are a shoe man. Are you a shoe guy? Are you a Is this accurate?
You've very quickly gone to the center of the mark. Yes, I am absolutely. It's funny because I'm like shape wise, I'm not a standard shape, right? So I've got like the same size waist as inseam, right? Which is not how they make pants. So you have to get like specially made pants, and like same thing with my shoulders. I'm like a 38S, so it's one of these challenging sizes, and shoes were just, man, I can just get them out of the box. I don't need to get some kind of a special this or that. So, I became very excited about shoes and different types of shoes. And, I think the sport coat with high tops is just as good a look as it gets out there. So, I probably started experimenting with that. Yeah, it's the best. So I probably started experimenting with my shoe collection, like 2006, and my feet have not changed since then, which means I have amassed a rather large swath of my closet is dedicated to layered shoes and different types of shoes. So you got me. You absolutely got me. Yes, I'm a shoe guy.
I love it. I love it because behind this, barn door behind me, I'm also a shoe guy. If you saw a stack of Jordan Military 4s or, maybe some others that have been just sitting in my collection, But I have to know, what's your go-to? Do you have a go-to brand in term of shoes? Because I also saw the high tops, and I was like, all right, maybe he's also a military force guy, but I could be wrong.
I tend to go off the beaten path a little bit when it comes to high tops. I found there's an Italian brand called P448. And this is not a plug. I don't own any of the company. This is just a genuine love of their shoes, because in my mind, and by the way, there was actually a startup that I wanted to build around this. The biggest disappointment with high tops, I believe, is a singular problem, and that is that you have to tie them. It's a broken function with high tops. It's like, well, I have a quarter more laces that I've got to figure out and get, exactly right. And so I had seen one pair of zip up high tops back in like 2007. And I was like, wait, this is a game changer. You could literally create a business where you send out your shoes, a zipper gets made and put on them, and they send them back. And you can get any pair of shoes that you want turned into zippers, because having to tie shoes is, it's a waste. It's a complete waste. And so P448s, which I am wearing right now.
Let's go.
They got the zipper. They got the zipper. So once I found kind of the shoe company that, number one, their shoes are just amazing and they're fun and they've got all different types of looks and feels and kind of color combinations and swagger to them, and they're zip up. And as soon as that happened, I had a year where I went a little overboard. And I've still been chewing through my the inventory that I accumulated that year. But I just, yeah, that's really my go-to brand is P448. I love them. They go on super sale like once a year. So even though you look at it, you're like, oh man, these are crazy expensive. You wait for that super sale and it's like, yeah, it's like, 100 and something bucks, and you've got a sick pair of zip up high tops.
All right, Slick Talkers, this episode is brought to you by Fido. As we're getting into this deeper conversation of technology and silos, one of the things you don't have to worry about being siloed is trash day, because when you sign up for Fido and you use the link in the show notes, you can get your trash automatically taken to the curb without having to interrupt or ask your guests, or even just bugging your housekeeper to do one more thing on top of cleaning an entire home before your guest's arrival. So go to the link in the show notes, which is getfido.com/slick-talk. Make sure you grab that link, sign up today. If you're on a current bin to curb service provider already, Fido is going to give you $50 off for every home and property you switch over to Fido. So go to getfido.com today, grab that link in the show notes, and let them know that Will from Slick Talk has sent you. Now we're back to the episode. I'm converted. You've converted me. I know that wasn't an ad and this was not a paid promotion, but I'm in. Count me in. Sounds incredible.
If the CEO wants to send me a few extra pairs, I would not argue. That would be fine with me.
We'll send them this clip. We'll make sure that they get this this message. Well, it's super incredible, because I was doing some digging on the Minty Living website, because outside of getting to talk to you and Sidra, which again was incredible to have that experience, I wanted to see what you guys are truly building behind the scenes, and I'm really impressed, because not often do you see a company, property management specifically in vacation rentals, hit a 4.9 rating with over 490 or 500. I think it was 490 when I saw, but on your website there was over 502. A 4.9 rating on Google, a incredible amount of reviews, and as you kind of said earlier, it leads into a fun question. But I think at scale, what you guys have done is really hard. So another flower to give you and Sidra for building something that has been able to show positive fruits. Not many people, I think the cost of scale, as we've talked on this podcast, can be a significant drop in guest experience, and that review score usually reflects that. So kind of tell us, where does Minty Living truly begin for you and Sidra? Artist and designer meets product and data tech and comes together under one roof into one brand. It's pretty interesting. So I would love to know the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. So like many things in my life, if you had told me I had been doing this thing 10 years prior, I would have scoffed at you and tell you to stop smoking whatever you're smoking. Like there's no way, if you had told me when I was living in New York City as a quant trader, working in, systematic trading and stat arb trading strategies, that I would be in the hospitality sector. There's not a chance I would have believed that. We left. So I lovingly call this my Atlanta 3.0. I did undergrad here, met Sidra in 2004. And then in 2009, we left Atlanta to go and I pursued my master's degree in Pittsburgh, master's in mathematical finance. Again, something that if you had told me I was going to do 10 years prior, there would have been no way I was pursuing that. We got to New York City in 2010. And because we knew Atlanta so well, and Sidra obviously with her background in design, this whole concept of furnished rentals really popped up in 2014. And we had a quadruplex that was a long-term unfurnished rental still in Atlanta that we were remotely managing. Obviously, not a lot of management was involved. But Sid said, hey, we've got to try this furnished rental thing. And of course, I immediately went to the numbers. I said, what is this going to cost? And we ran the numbers. And so we tried it on a little 750 square foot carriage house. And the results were just astounding. They were just astounding. And the yield that we were able to generate, suddenly there was this huge opportunity to really change the profile of the yield for a real estate asset. And at the end of the day, there's a great phrase about vacation rentals, which is that you're really just maximizing the utility of an asset. That's all this is. If I'm the CEO of Delta, my choice is, well, do I transport people or do I transport packages? I've got this airplane that's an asset, and my job is to maximize the utility of that. And what became clear to me in 2014 was this is a new way to maximize the utility of this asset. So we began to do remote real estate development. And I say we, and I'm being completely hyperbolic. It was all Sidra. She did everything. She would fly down, design the units, put everything in. She went through the furnishing, the staging, digital asset creation. She has this incredible eye for building these curated types of visual experiences, as you can tell by the scene behind me, which is obviously entirely from her as well. And suddenly we were real estate developers, but we were living in New York City. So we would acquire, renovate, furnish, get about 6 months of historical rental income, and then sell it to investors. And every time we would sell the property, people would ask us, would you please manage it for us? And the age-old aphorism of, the third time somebody calls you a horse, you go out and you buy yourself a saddle. And
yes,
that's essentially what we did. So we moved down from New York in April of 2020. It was the middle of COVID, but film and production here in Atlanta was booming. We had 5 units under management. We owned all 5 of them, and now we're called 175 units. We still own just 5 of them. And of course, we've seen many ups and downs and twists and turns. In 2020 and 21 and 22, it felt like it was shooting fish in a barrel. It was like, this is, we raised capital. We built technology that I would argue is fundamentally unique to this industry that our goal is to leverage in the coming years. And the goal was to, go to 5 to 10 more cities in the next 3 to 5 years. We went to venture markets in February of 2023. And of course, venture markets collapsed with Silicon Valley Bank in March of 23. So it went from shooting fish in a barrel to, being stuck in a barrel.
Or fighting for pennies sometimes.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. That really began what I think, of course, has been a very substantial industry shift as well. We were feeling the effects of that and certainly still have, but it really, the genesis, just going back to the original point of, where does this guest experience, these elements of design come into play? We essentially figured out how to enable Sidra's design capability with systematized workflows and automation so that she could really act as though she was a Coco Chanel, kind of supervising the creation of a handbag. And she didn't have to actually knit the handbag herself, but she can still look at, ensure that the design schematics and the mood boards that the lead designers are putting together fit exactly within her view of what a visual aesthetic and design should be. And we're able to bring a pretty consistent visual aesthetic and design on board, which I think is one of the unique aspects of the portfolio that lets us generate such substantial amounts of direct bookings, which I think is really where you try to create. It goes back to the consistency piece that you talked about. Jamie Lane had a great post, I think it was 2 days ago, about your likelihood of being Superhost given the number of units that you manage. And it, to me, was such an incredible synthesis of something that lots of people talk about, which is the larger you get, the harder it is to achieve that consistency.
100%. Well, that actually, you, without seeing my notes, you set yourself up for the next question I had, which is perfect, because you did comment on my post where I said Superhost status means nothing, right? And how a lot of people were showing off their Superhost badges. And for me, I wanted to get the message across that it's not about the Superhost badge, it's about the standard that you set yourself, right? Don't let Airbnb tell you what that standard is. You go out and execute a higher standard. That's what my military platoon sergeant told me. He said, the Army says you have to do this. This is your minimum requirement as a soldier of a male, or a male sex at this age, at this height, at this weight. This is your minimum. That's your standard. Why not?
Like, were they? And they were physical. Were they physical requirements that you had to meet?
Yeah, okay. Physical standards. So we're going over like PE tests and stuff like that. And so he's like, this is your standard. Why would you just settle for that minimum standard, right? Like if that's what you have to hit, why not push for more, right?
What'd you get your mile time down to? What'd you get your mile time down to? Talk to me.
I got my 2 mile run was at 10:58. So I was not too bad.
That is not extremely impressive. That is extremely impressive. I am just floored. That is incredible. That is commendable. Wow.
It was gnarly.
That's unbelievable. And sorry, I'm trying to like back into what your VO2 max probably was. And you were how old?
So this was in 2015 when I did the 2 mile run test at AIT in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. So it was quite a while ago. I tried running a mile and I could barely get 11 minutes. So it was pretty tough. You let it slip.
I think you were probably, you had a VO2 max of, you were in the 60s is my guess, which is very, very, very good. That's an exceptional 2 miles.
We would do this thing called Car Wash Hill, and there was this guy from Uganda in our platoon, and he would go, "Slickers, how the hell are you behind me? How are you still here?" he was like, "Dude, how are you still with me?" And we would be the only two at the top, and we would just be sitting waiting for the rest of our platoon, and it was a good time. Like, we became best friends. Alamayo, he was a good guy. But anyways, going into the question that you basically set yourself up for. Shoot, now you got me all distracted.
Sorry, you went into physical activity and you started talking about benchmark standards. So I took the bait, Will. That wasn't on me. Yeah. Come on.
Yeah, no, that was a me thing. I got sucked into my own bait. But setting standards. So it's really great. And I'm glad that you brought it up, because from one of the things I noticed and I wanted to bring up into the show is, tell me about the naming of homes spaces, because on your guys' website, it specifically says spaces, and you just specifically said it too, where the design, the optimization, the data creates an immaculate space. It creates a new standard that Minty Living was able to achieve and really kind of set a high bar for. It does, and I was kind of thinking about this before the recording. On your guys' website, I didn't feel like I was looking at homes. I was really impressed with the quality of the interior space, I guess. Like, the simple way to put it was, it didn't feel like I was walking into a vacation home, so to speak. It more or less felt like it was curated. It was like, okay, this is a place where I'm like, I can see myself doing work here, and I can see myself relaxing and watching the game here. And like, it was a very much a immersed feeling kind of right out the gate. So kind of walk me through your guys' expectation, or even not expectation, but creating that standard of spaces rather than homes. I'm very curious on that.
And one thing that, you really just mentioned that you made my heart swell. You really made my heart swell, which is, you said, I can imagine myself doing work here.
Yeah.
And we'll certainly get more into the ways that you can bifurcate our industry. There's a tremendous amount of nuance in ways that we can segment these different markets. One of them, of course, is leisure versus urban markets. Mm-hmm. And if you're in a leisure market, then you're really trying to create a fundamentally different experience than if you're in an urban market. And for us, this really was about, we want to curate an experience where people feel like they can be most performant, i.e., they can work really well. They feel there is a certain amount of function that is enabled with the home. By the way, people will come in and say, maybe they tour a home and they'll say, hey, can I convert this third bedroom to an office? Done. So we have this entire conversion process where we let people go through and say, what is going to be your optimal configuration here? Again, we started with the film and production industry, and you have a director who's coming in, who's going to be there by himself for however period of time, and then has his family coming in. And so you've got to be able to make that space dynamic. And that really was a critical, and again, the joke that we often say is, Sidra's job is to create insights, and then my job is to scale them. And that's exactly it, which is that these were all insights that Sidra really had, of understanding the importance of function, understanding the importance of a place where you could get great work done that filled you in having a visual aesthetic, not being overwhelming, not being so designed that you couldn't get stuff done, but this beautiful optimal balance of beauty and function. And so that became a big part of our fabric of who we are and what we built, which is a goal to be a home for high performers, for people that are there to do their best work in an urban setting here in Atlanta, Georgia. And that became a key part of what we do.
I love that. And to kind of tie it back to what you were saying earlier, and kind of where we were going with that LinkedIn post about the superhost status, right? So you commented on that post saying, with the cost of scale truly is quality of service, right? Like, you lose that quality, that personalization, that ability to be a little bit more dynamic, but yet you guys still sit at a 4.9 rating of Google reviews, over 400 or 500 plus reviews into that. So obviously we've seen this happen. This is something I've also talked about on the show, in terms of, you look at the big chain hotels, Hilton, Marriott, etc. They, in the beginning, super high personal touch. Once they got to a certain scale point, it's hard to have that scale with you in terms of quality. And I'm just curious, because I felt like we've seen the pendulum, and you can speak to this, and I know you have in the past, but during COVID, specifically in vacation rentals and hotels and just more lodging sector of hospitality, everyone cut. Well, let's streamline, let's optimize, let's get rid of humans, let's apply AI, let's add more technology, let's become more automated, super far on the pendulum. And now I feel like we're kind of seeing that pendulum swing back, and it's going all towards human touch, hospitality, one size fits one concept, of rather than one size fits all.
Yeah.
But I'm afraid that, we go too far on the pendulum again, and we get so human focused that we just kind of end up creating the same cycle of problems. And so finding that perfect middle ground with tech, data, optimization, and functionality, and then adding that human element to create moments and experience and whatnot. And so I'm sorry to ramble, but you guys have gotten into this point where I think you can speak on this, but do you see the industry also shifting that way? Because I also kind of feel like when people get so excited about hospitality or technology, they can go one side versus somewhere in the middle
Mm-hmm.
where it's like a beautiful in between?
Well, the other thing that I think the short answer is, of course, that we've done our best. I think we have succeeded. And I would argue that the true problem that lies at the center of what you spoke about around consistency, around human focused, really lies at the conflicting and contraindicative forces between large OTAs and the actual providers of the space. So let me try to unpack that just a little bit. So if I were to say to you, what's your favorite hotel brand? And you said, Hilton or Ritz or any number of different hotels. And I were then say to you, wait, but Expedia isn't your favorite hotel brand? You would of course look at me with this incredulous face saying, what do you mean? Expedia is not a hotel brand. That's ridiculous. And yet in the most recent Super Bowl in February, we saw an ad where the phrase that was used in the ad is, it's better in an Airbnb.
Yeah.
But there's no such thing. It does not exist. Just like an Expedia hotel room does not exist. There is no such thing as staying in an Airbnb. And if we then take it one step further and then look at business life cycles. So we, of course, in the early stages when innovation is very, very high, versus in later stages when innovation declines, we see commensurate changes in price. And so as adoption grows and increases, prices decline as something becomes commoditized. And if we look at what's most important for OTAs right now, it's one thing and one thing only, and that's the lowest possible price. If Booking.com sees that your prices are lower on Airbnb than Booking.com, they don't promote your properties. If Vrbo sees that its prices are higher than Booking.com, it's not going to promote your properties on Vrbo. These OTAs are doing everything they can to depress prices and commoditize what we do as much as possible. And yet, we are still under this ruse that you're actually staying in an Airbnb when in fact you're not. There's no such thing as an Airbnb. And I think it's a very interesting point and in the development of this industry. You mentioned, does the pendulum just keep swinging back and forth? And I guess what I will say is, if we, as the actual place where you're staying, which is not you're not staying at a Booking.com, you're not staying at a Vrbo, right? You're just not. There's no such thing as staying at a Vrbo. If we are unable to change and educate the population to help them understand that the commoditization is the Expedia part. Great. Go to Expedia, please, and find whatever you need to find wherever it is you're going. But then acknowledge that you're staying with the hotel brand. And I think this very clearly dovetails into how difficult it has been and continues to be to build a hotel brand in this industry. With what we've seen with the fits and starts, shall we say, with the acquisition of Vacasa, we are getting a very clear indication around how hard it is to build a hotel brand in this industry. And if we are unable to build a hotel brand, and of course, the OTAs are just as happy not having there be one. To them, really a hotel brand and vacation rental management is nothing more than a threat. Because at the end of the day, well, Hilton gives me the best possible prices if I book online with Hilton. And so I'm just going to go direct to Hilton instead of going through Expedia, because they're always going to give me the best possible price. And that gets us back to the commoditization concern, which is, well, wait a second, then the best price isn't on any OTA. It's when you go and you book direct. So I think our biggest challenge right now is truly understanding how to build this level of consistency at scale. And initially, this was the first attempt of this was really focusing on technology. Okay, great. We're going to build technology, and we can certainly split hairs about why they were making that statement, why they were making that pitch that they were really building technology, and this wasn't just furnished vacation rental management. But nonetheless, technology didn't solve it. And I think you can look at what we see in the industry now, and I've got graphics that I've put together on this. I mean, I've analyzed about 10,000 vacation rental managers across the United States, and your 80th percentile comes right across at 40 units. It's like 42 units, right? But it's basically saying that 80% of managers manage less than 40 units. And so what we see is that this capacity for technology to enable scale doesn't exist in our industry. That's not what technology is helping us do. What technology is helping us do is optimize the 20 units that we manage or the 30 units that we manage. But as we bring on more and more units, the existing technology frameworks fail to help us manage complexity. And because it doesn't help us manage complexity, we get this upper limiting glass ceiling of 40 units for 80% of providers.
Man, there's a lot to unpack with that. So no, that's a great, man, such a great perspective. And that's why I love this podcast, because it just opens up my mind to so many different ideas and so many different routes, and so many cool conversations. So thank you for sharing your thoughts, because I wonder if I could form a full sentence here and articulate this question well. But one of my issues with technology in our space, we've seen hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars be poured in from products and platforms on the property management software side, to then the operations software side, to the dynamic pricing software side, to the hard lock side, to like all these different, there's like what Andrew Kitchell and I created early days, a chart of all the different categories in vacation rental tech, and it was like over 30 something categories or something like that, right? And so there's a lot of brands for people to pick from, and I just don't feel like a majority, I would say 5% of those tech pieces or tech companies actually have a viable product that is good and functional, and not just good in terms of features and ability to actually get a job done, but like actually functional in the term of my mom could log in and easily understand where to go and how to add a property or to message a guest or to do something. And so I feel like front end development is quite often missed in terms of product development and design. And we have a lot of people that in the industry who are tech savvy, can code, can build a product that has features and functionality, but doesn't look good. It's not sexy. It's very much like, looks like 1995 dial-up type situation. And
in our industry,
no. But it's one of those things where it's like, I feel like we've had such an edge over hotels in the beginning. When I came from the hotel world, right? I saw Opera. It was no sexy product. It was, Marcia as well in the back of the Marriott. Like, holy crap! Talk about like looking at the Matrix. Literally, it was like a green screen of just code that you had to figure out type situation. But anyways, to go into this whole loop here, I just don't feel like our products inside of technology sectors of hospitality are quite there. And you've made the point, right? Like, if obviously a property manager can't get past the 42 unit situation with their tech stack in order to optimize at scale, it's quite a significant sign. My question to you is, as a product and data guy, where should the focus return in terms of product and tech? Is it already in an existing category, or do we need to rethink and reimagine what a real solution behind the scenes looks like when it comes to technology and scaling hospitality at a high standard, at a consistency that you're talking about? Sorry to ramble, but hopefully that
no. I think you touched on a lot of really important pieces here, right? So we can start off by just thinking about product development. So I went from quant finance and then I really focused on product. So I was chief of product specifically around building a lot of these financial analytics type dashboards, reports, capabilities for big financial institutions. So I got very deep into the product world of how do we build great products. And product development 101 is, of course, understanding your target market and who your target market is. And if we take the fact that we talked about a couple minutes ago, which is, well, 80% of property managers are managing less than 40 units, well, then of course I should be designing products for somebody who's managing on average 30 units. And that's of course what we see. And if I'm trying to now design products for a company that is looking to scale, well, I have a pretty paltry target market. And so we have this fascinating conundrum where you can certainly look at some of the aggregators and larger companies that have made it through the very challenging times, right? I mean, Zeus Living didn't make it. Front Desk didn't make it. Casa, arguably has made it, right? So
yeah,
they built their own tech. They put a huge amount of investment into their own technology. Why? Because there really wasn't technology made for a property manager that's managing thousands of units. So this gets into a question of, well, we can't really design new puzzle pieces, i.e. new technology, because if we build new technology and we focus on the market that is going to scale, it's a small target market and we don't have a large enough provider. We don't have a large enough target market for that cohort. So it doesn't make sense to spend the R&D and the technology spend. So what does this start to look like? And in my mind, it's a very clear path. And that is, my belief is that this industry doesn't have a technology problem. It has a data problem. This is what I mean by that concept. So if I was building a 1 million square foot factory and I wanted to produce electric car batteries, there is software, optimization systems, and really theories of how to organize that factory floor to achieve certain outcomes, to minimize things like waste or defaults, to maximize throughput. We have the entire concept is called organization and management. And I can't remember the Goal was the name of the revolutionary book that really got into this idea of organization and management around theory of constraints. So we have all of this really rich bedrock of how we think about what they would call multi-objective optimization. And now let's look at the vacation rental management world. I go to a conference, we've all been to these conferences, and what every single person at the conference says, it's very hard for me to restrain myself when they say this, but what everybody says is there's no right way to do this. There's no right way. This is an art, not a science. Everybody does this differently, right? You hear this same thing on loop everywhere you go. And it breaks my heart because at the end of the day, we are dealing with an extremely complex system with a number of points of failure. Everything is happening in physical space. So going back to this idea of a factory floor, we're dealing with not a factory floor, but hundreds of factory floors in different places with different workers that have different functions. And now we start saying, well, wait a second, what do you mean there's no optimal configuration to this? There is. It's just an incredibly sophisticated and difficult problem for us to try to tease apart. And really, there hasn't been the incentive for somebody to solve this. So going back to the amount of work involved and the outcome for that work, look, we've essentially had 2 PMSs make it big enough to challenge Track and Streamline, right? Track and Streamline were extremely legacy development systems, and we've had 2 PMSs really make it big enough. Now, if there's, obviously there's many, many more, but you can argue that the level of capital raising that HostAway and Guesty have been able to achieve really puts them in a different league.
All right, Slick Talkers. Speaking of big players that have done successful things in the vacation rental property management software side of the industry, our friends at Hostfully actually have done this magically. So Hostfully is a property management product or platform where operators like you can list their vacation homes, sign up for the marketplace of other tools and technology like an operational software, a revenue management software, etc., and can create the tech stack that you find optimal. Now, the best thing about Hostfully is that they have a unified inbox, and they also have direct integrations to channels like Airbnb, Booking.com, Vrbo, etc., in order for you to have to manage less with more. So you get to ensure that your property is being seen and connected on the right platforms, and that you are connected to the right vendors and technology pieces in the ecosystem of vacation rental tech. Well, then Hostfully is obviously a standout software and product, just like the ones mentioned in the show. So go to the show notes below, grab the link, sign up for a demo with Frank. And if you just sign up in general and don't do a demo, use the code HFM300 for $300 off your onboarding, so that way you get directly set up on Hostfully today. Go to the link in the show notes, let them know that Will sent you, and of course, we are back to today's episode with Benjamin Gross.
Well, why is that? If every property manager needs a PMS and our two legacy providers in the system really weren't able to achieve this high level of technology, then why are we not seeing much more sophisticated entrants coming into and trying to own this market? And it's because it's not really a big enough market to build a massive technology company out of. So, the magic number in tech is 100 million of ARR. And you cannot, by getting 10% market share in the vacation rental management industry, charging $10 per property per month, you cannot make it to 100 million of ARR, which means the incentive structure isn't there to build this great technology. So in my mind, this is about data and understanding how to begin to optimize such an incredibly complex system. Because if I can take your configuration details, your locations, your customer segmentation, your existing technology stack, now I can begin to say, great, what I identify as your failure points is here. You're having guests are checking into unclean units for this reason. Or here, people aren't getting adequate entry instructions and are frustrated because they have to go to a key lock box instead of using a keyless entry pad. Or here, right? You have a many, many different failure points in the system. But if you can begin to enable this incredibly sophisticated system, which, by the way, spans a number of functional areas. So the functional areas of vacation rental management, let's pick one of them, trust accounting, right? So we've built our entire trust accounting system from scratch. And I asked our financial controller, she's incredible. She's a fractional financial controller for a number of different industries. And I asked her, 6 months ago, I said, can I just ask you, is what we have built and the nuance in the vacation rental management industry as it relates to trust accounting and finance and accounting, general ledgers, are we like in the 25th percentile, 50th percent? Like, how sophisticated and complicated is this industry relative to others? She said, there's nothing that I've ever done that's close. Nothing that I've ever done. And that's just finance and accounting. So you take finance and accounting and you overlay guest experience, business development, revenue management, cleaning, made the number of functional areas. I didn't even get into, of course, owner inbound, and then you get into to onboarding and how do you bring a property online. It's such a massively complex system. It's very, very difficult for somebody who's managing 30 units to think about, how am I going to scale that system? They're just trying to keep their heads above water. And ironically, when I came to your retreat that you had me at, that I was so grateful that I got to attend, and I got to speak to people that had 100 units under management, 200 units under management. What I found was people were even more stressed out. This idea of, as you scale, number one, your marginal cost to service those contracts is going to be lower. And number two, you're going to be able to step away and focus on big ideas and these bigger concepts it's not true. It's not true in our industry. And so in my mind, we are missing the fundamental building blocks to understand how to optimize human capital, technology, the different physical operations. How do we go ahead and optimize our workflow configuration, messaging, communication? And of course, to your point, you had mentioned the number of technology vendors. Well, it's impossible to try to optimize that system when you don't have an integrated data architecture to be able to create that measurability from. So a very, very long-winded way of why I believe we have a data problem and not a technology problem in this industry.
It's incredible the way you weave that back. It's beautiful, beautifully spoken. And I'm very, very curious because, man, there's been a lot of conversations through either Good Morning Hospitality or this podcast or other shows, or even just being on LinkedIn in general, where this is where the hard part comes in. And I think the reason why, like you said, one, the TAM isn't there for someone to come solve this problem, right? For a total addressable market in terms of the bigger operators trying to scale this. It's just, it doesn't, you're 100% right. It doesn't truly make sense. But B, one of the things that kept coming up at the retreat when we were talking to Horst Schulze, you guys kept asking about dispersed inventory, right? So like, it's not consolidated like his Ritz-Carlton hotels were and being able to just go floor to floor. It's miles to miles, like apart.
Do you remember his response, by the way? Do you remember, to this day, Sidra and I have continually hearkened upon, the ex-CEO of the Ritz-Carlton, everything that he believes in hospitality. He's talking about all of these things. And of course, he's talking about it in the context of a hotel, and then asking him, okay, so how can this be done? He talked about his wife managing a couple furnished rentals, I think, here in Atlanta.
Yeah, five of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So how can this be done in a distributed context, i.e. for vacation rentals? And his response was, I don't think you can.
Yeah.
It was literally his response. And that was, I've had a lot of sinking feelings in my stomach before. That was certainly
100%. 100%. And then he gave the example. He's like, there's a reason why resorts have, villas on top of a resort, right? Like where it's a building and then a bunch of private villas, because they can still use that centralized housekeeping, maintenance, restaurants, infrastructure that they built, but keeping that, that space a little bit, but still not far enough where it's out of sight or out of range for the housekeeper. So yeah, it was very interesting. When he said that, I kind of laughed. I was like, "Oh, not the answer we were expecting," but just kind of like,
this is at least he's honest. With vacation rental managers, Horst. This is like, hey man.
Well, at least he was honest and was, very much upfront. But it's so true, and a lot of us got into this industry for the sake of hospitality, right? To curate and create moments, and to let this be a connection-based business. And to your point, maybe like there's that fine line of, because I always hear people talk about personalization, right? Like being like personalization is so important in hospitality, which is 100% true. That one size fits one model is 100% that. But when people think about personalization, they usually think about automations, and that usually ties right back to AI, and they kind of misunderstand what automation truly is and what AI truly is. And then when you talk about data, people talk about data, but they don't understand the utilization of data in order to actually maximize the ability to have that one size fits one at scale. And so for you, when you say we have a data problem, can you break that down into kind of like, imagine I'm 5.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, little Willie. Yeah, no, it's a great question. So we have a lot of people that are we have a lot of children that aren't growing. We have many, many children that aren't growing and that are sick. And we want to get them medicine. We want to help them heal so that they can grow and be healthy, but we don't know why they're sick. And unless we can actually go through and diagnose these kids and find out what's going on and understand what's happening inside of this population, we can't help them grow and we can't help them get bigger.
Dang. So
was that okay? Was that all right?
100%.
Did I go too far? You're like, dude, that was too simplified. Now give me the middle ground. No, that was okay.
Yeah.
All right.
No, that was great, because I've always been saying the hospitality industry is broken, and now you're kind of making me question that statement in terms of, is maybe not the hospitality industry as a whole, and to generalize that, but our data behind the hospitality industry is broken, like you were saying. The understanding, to be able to diagnose, we don't have the right data points or a data pool. I don't know what the right term would be. I'm very much a microphone, not an actual data or tech scientist. But
well, let's break it down, right? So now let's talk about some of these functional areas, okay? Which I think helps really draw a very clear understanding to all of this. And let's use AI, right, to essentially say why we are incapable of building artificial intelligence to truly support us. And by the way, this is one of my huge efforts that we're doing right now, right? Because we've built this incredible data architecture, I'm actually trying to build this thing right now. So, spoiler alert. But nonetheless, let's talk about why it's hard for most others to build something like this. Let's focus on the siloed technology, and if we were to use artificial intelligence to try to make it better. So first, let's talk with communications. Okay, so we have a communication between a guest and a property manager, and we can have AI be listening to it. Heck, we can have AI responding to it, and we can provide that AI with a certain set of instructions. We can provide it context about how to respond. This is the type of voice. This is what we're looking for. We're looking for a guest that's unhappy. And there are sentiment analyzers all over the place. We have our own sentiment analyzer. There are a bunch of these different communication platforms that have sentiment analyzers. Great, wonderful. So a guest, all of a sudden we identify, the artificial intelligence identifies that this guest is unhappy. It could even very well identify what the issue is. Hey, this guest is unhappy, and they're unhappy because they were supposed to have an in-residence clean this week, and the in-residence clean didn't show up, and we haven't gotten back to them about the new scheduled date, let's say. Okay, great. That's wonderful. Now we have an AI that is very clear and capable of identifying a sentiment as well as potentially what the issue is. But now what are the next steps? Well, the next steps don't live inside the siloed conversation application that we've been using. The next steps now are living in our task management system, or maybe our vendor resolution system, right? So I would argue the vacation rental management industry doesn't have a task management system. We had to build our own. So let's stick with standard out-of-the-box applications. So let's say that we're using, Breezeway as our vendor management platform. Well, Breezeway is where our vendor management platform defines, that's where we architect and instrument the different types of tasks that we have, how we measure those tasks, who the users are, how all of that's done. Well, now there is this chasm, right? There's this wall that we can't get between to get from a conversation where sentiment has gone negative, and maybe even we've identified the issue, can now be brought into the world of vendor management and resolution. This is the appropriate vendor that we want to work with a specific issue. This is when they are available. This is how we schedule them. And then going back to the communication platform to be able to communicate with the guest, to go into the guest management piece. And so those little hops from one siloed application to another siloed application are everywhere. Maybe the guest wants a discount. The guest said, well, look, I've been waiting for an in-residence clean for the last 3 weeks. It hasn't happened.
Yeah.
This has been deeply frustrating. Okay, we want to offer them 10% off of this month's stay, which is a whole nother point of frustration that we've now conditioned guests to ask for money off with acts of God, which I just think is the craziest thing. And it gets, anyway, maybe for another time or for the third hour of the podcast. But, we now are in the concept of finance and accounting and discounting a guest stay. Well, that is neither your communication platform nor your vendor management platform. You are now squarely in your financial management platform. So yet another hop, right? It's now another hop that's happened. And by the way, maybe you need to clear this with the owner. And now you need to hop to another. You can make these hops again and again to these siloed applications. And it's very clear to see, well, heck, in order to really train a large language model to be able to handle these sorts of things, I need to have all of this incredibly interconnected data. I need to know conversation timelines for a guest, the tasks that happened to that guest. Where did they book? What were the communications that took place? What were the events during the stay? Which property was it at? I need to be able to connect all of this, then train the large language model or the AI, then to be able to act and then instrument the AI with the capacity. And again, you make it so it is human approval based. The AI says, I recommend you send this message to the guest who's frustrated about their in-residence clean not happening. I recommend you send this vendor to do it at this time, and then you can make it human approval based. But just building that level of data architecture is incredibly difficult, and it doesn't really exist. Obviously, Casa has built an incredible data architecture. We at Minty Living have one that's very similar. I would imagine, I don't know what Casa's data architecture is. I know that ours is. We've had looked at by several people, and it was built by a senior architect at Netflix, and it's pretty incredible. We built the Death Star. We thought we were going to 5 to 10 more cities in 5 years, and so but that capacity to then take a step back and say, what is the optimal way to implement this problem so that we can, number one, maximize guest satisfaction. We want happy guests. I want guests to book with Minty Living. I don't want them to think it's a Verbo, right? So happy guests. I also want to maximize yield for my owners. Critical component. And by the way, if I'm not profitable as a company, then this all goes away. So you really are your objective optimization. There's multi objectives that you're trying to optimize in that process. And so it requires an incredibly sophisticated data architecture to do that.
In terms of this data architecture, this is something I've been thinking about, and part of the categories that Andrew Kitchell and I were kind of creating or putting all these companies into in buckets. There's no real middleware in the industry, which, like you're saying, these silo tech from communication to property data and information to task management to vendor management to pricing, they're all very much siloed. And especially like the API sector of our industry is completely ruined. In my opinion, it's, you have no standard API, which is a problem that we'll get into and you and I have talked about offline. But with this, like data architecture not being there, is it middleware? Is it something that comes into the middle to unsilo? Like, is that the issue? And my other question to you is, are we making the business too difficult? And not saying like, I want to take the easy route out, but the one thing we noticed when I was a property manager, I recently exited my company, but
why? Hold on. But why? Right? You've literally, you've gone exactly where hundreds of entrepreneurs, they start as a property manager, and before long, they pull a ripcord. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but why? No. Why did you do that?
Well, honestly, I felt like we had no real say or control over our business. Like that 100% for me was the underlying reason. Also, Hospitality FM and all my other stuff, it was a dominant part of my business. I couldn't really give it the full attention, but owners are paying. I had to fire my own parents, right? Like when you can't even like get your own. It's 100% true. I had to fire my parents. It's an
amazing anecdote of
You have
the
this
challenges.
business, that you want to create, right? Like you have this vision and you're like, we're going to execute at this level of service. We're going to create this standard of guest experience. We are going to be this type of hospitality brand. And then you have owners telling you no, housekeepers that are spread. Well, this was also our issue. We were spread across multiple cities and multiple markets, which is a bad idea. And so to be that dispersed and to have no control or say on when people were going in to clean, when inspectors, it was just kind of a free for all. And you can create as many standards and SOPs that you want, but at the end of the day, there was just too many moving pieces that it was like, well, we can't do anything with the inventory that we've signed, like outside of play with revenue management and make sure like the messages and cadences are going out on time. Like really, it felt restricted. So that's just my opinion. But
what about, I mean, I guess, look, you had two adjacent businesses that were going side by side.
Yeah.
If there's a lot of calculus involved in, when you're processing this thing, okay, I'm going to go with Hospitality FM. Was one felt like it was just a constant amount of work that wasn't necessarily productive in growing you? Was it that one felt more thankless? Like, I want you to go a little deeper, because I think we don't get to hear this well. Like at the end of the day, and again, this goes back to the incredible, week that I got to share with the people that you invited to this mastermind week seminar, which was how incredibly eroded people's resilience felt. They were done. They were absolutely done. They had been hammered by guests, by owners, by a shrinking industry. And, that's something in my mind that we don't get to talk a lot about. We don't really get to discuss very much the fact that, look, this is a really, really challenging business to run, to grow, to sustain. And it goes back to the OTAs that don't want there to become a hotel brand. They're happy to have it be, great. You have one or two vacation rentals and that's all that you do. It is hard. It's very, very hard doing this. I just would love to hear like your last piece about why, what was about hospitality versus going into a vacation rental management and growing that.
Honestly, it's all the pieces that you mentioned. I think for me, it's not the type of experience I wanted to provide. So that is why also just in general, this is 100% me personally speaking, building a business in any industry, whether it's a podcast network or a property management company or a software product, it's hard. A business in general is very, very hard. And I think from my point of view, I would have rather put up with podcasters and sponsors than I would have guests and owners. Those were the battles I was picking. And also, to be honest, like I just have more fun in this sector, right? So like, not saying I won't get back into property management or I won't, my goal, and speaking out loud for the first time on the show, is I want to own a hotel. I want to be into a part where I own the asset rather than manage it, because
which is
the end
exactly
of the day,
where Mint House went.
Yes,
ironically,
100%.
right? Mint House opened their hotel in Nashville, and absolutely, I don't think your conclusion is out of the ordinary at all.
I think a lot of people are going from short-term rentals to boutique hotel ownership, or from management to property ownership. We're like, hey, we should own the asset. We should have our flagship property that is the representation of Minty Living. Like you said, you have 5 houses, so being able to say these are the standard of Minty Living, the way we operate, the way we design, the way we curate and message our guests and create experiences, like that is your guys' standard that you're able to ripple down into the, I don't know your inventory size, but I'll say as 200 plus homes that you get to set that standard, right? And I don't think we had that opportunity. For me, in Hospitality FM, Slick Talk and GMH are our standard of production, of consistency, of blah, 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 that we can pass down to the other shows. It kind of has like a similar parallel. So that's my answer to you. But I think, so you're 100% right. So many people are tired and they have been beaten down. And again, just business in general is hard. And when the answer to these complex problems is, well, there is no right way of doing it, that is even more defeating.
Yeah.
So it's coming into like this maturity inflection point where the industry needs to more or less be a cooperation type situation rather than competition, as David Krauss says, where it's coming to the table, it's building it bigger, making it a bigger table to get more voices, more perspective, more different models under one roof to kind of try and solve these problems. Because like you said, there's so many different touch points of this issue.
Yeah. The last piece about, you mentioned, and this gets into another challenge of being an entrepreneur in this area, but you asked if it could be middleware. And the answer to that in my mind is it could be if they figure out a different pricing model, because this per property per month, for me is a deeply frustrating paradigm, because it doesn't. If I'm paying, let's say my contribution profit per unit is $300 a month, and I'm paying 50 to a PMS, 10 for a vendor management, 10 for a communication platform. Top line revenue of $300 per month, not contribution, but top line revenue, and I'm paying $100 per month per property. I'm essentially giving a third of my revenue to software providers. And that does not, back to the piece around leverage and what technology in my mind fails to provide leverage in this industry is, my cost, it goes down from $50 a month to $45 if you make it to 100 unit. Again, the marginal cost truly is negligent. So, and of course, the increasing complexity far surpasses any marginal reduction in cost from the software. So in my mind, it can't be middle. I think what Jason did with Key Data was brilliant, which was like, it's like $300 a year. It was, it was basically giving it away, which I think he had a certain amount of success with 360 Blue, where people were willing to say, okay, we're gonna go with this. We're going to bet on somebody who has a clear demonstration that they've been able to succeed. But I don't think you can build the panacea. So yes, I don't think it's another technology platform, but we do everything. We do communication, and in general, building a panacea is very, very hard to do. Google tried to do it, and I would argue they failed. They tried to do email plus chat plus sheets plus task management, and at the end of the day, I have a Google phone. I'm a big fan of Google. They failed, and I view them as arguably the greatest software engineering company on the face of the planet. So if they can't build a panacea, I don't have a ton of faith in anybody else to do it. So I do think you're right in that it has to be some form of middleware, but you can't ask a provider who's giving $1 out of every 3 that they get in the door to software to then spend any more money just to be able to try to have an integrated data architecture and maybe some suggestions about how to solve problems so that they can scale more effectively.
So if it is a middleware and it's the pricing model doesn't work, where do we go from here? Because that's why I love these conversations, right? Because it's like we get to this point, we get to this climax and conclusion, but it's like from a listener perspective, I'm thinking like, okay, I have a data problem. I'm overworked and underpaid. A lot of my money is going to technology that doesn't help my bottom line. Where do we go from here as an industry and as operators and entrepreneurs? Like we are like, oh man, the amount of incredible, like if I just hype up my listeners really quick from the sense of that we have so many cool entrepreneurs that listen to this show, from hotels to short-term rentals to tech to marketing to whatever, and they are solving such crazy problems. But it also comes back to this point of like, okay, but like how, like, I don't know, as an entrepreneur myself, I only know truly where I'm at as an entrepreneur. I've yet to experience what it's like to be at this type of scale or this type of scale or this type of scale. It all comes with a different set of problems and opportunities to solve those problems. But yeah, where do we go from here, Benjamin?
My view is don't just tell me problems, tell me solutions. That's valid. I think that if you have truly solved the problem of data, then one of the biggest headaches that you've also solved the problem for is integration cost. So, and again, the paucity of aggregators that have succeeded versus the ones that have failed. Right? We have very, very few. And we just saw the news the other day about Steve Milo and V-Trips. I mean, it's if anybody thinks it's easy to build a roll up, come again. Like it is not. And we have a tremendous number of failures that haven't succeeded in doing this. So we could say, well, if we're truly able to take the data and turn it into actionable, meaningful decisions, specifically as it relates to consolidation, specifically as it relates to reducing your integration costs if you want to expand, that's where I think you find the opportunity to pay for that middleware, which is to say, well, if I am V-Trips and I'm looking to acquire a provider in a specific market, right now, what I essentially have is a set of financials, right? I'm looking at their financials. I'm looking at their booking data. I'm looking at their unit count over time. I'm trying to understand their attrition. Sure, I want to know their technology stack, but it's really a profit-based calculation. It's saying, okay, great, I'm going to buy a profitable company, and then I'm going to let it continue to exist on its own island, which is, I think, why one of the reasons V-Trips has been successful. They're not going to try to make you part of the mothership. But if we truly are gaining these efficiencies of scale and reducing the marginal cost to service these contracts, then there has to be a world where we're able to service these contracts at a lower cost, i.e., I'm able to identify a provider that has similar technology to what I have, an operations architecture that I know I can take the least amount of hops to make similar to my own, and I can now instrument from a data and measurability standpoint to look at my dashboard of performance before even the numbers come out. I can see, oh, look, the maintenance tech in Austin is doing a horrible job relative to the maintenance technicians in Nashville. And I know that based on throughput, based on guest satisfaction forms, all of these elements of measurability. And now I truly have a capacity to scale this business. And that, in my mind, if you can make that data productive and make it work towards achieving those goals of achieving scale, that's where you're also going to find the people that are willing to pay for that software and that middleware.
That's a really good point. And kind of, as you're discussing that, makes me think of a Jeff Bezos clip I watched a long time ago on Instagram or YouTube or something like that, where he talks about, as a CEO of a big tech company or as a founder, an entrepreneur of any business, right? You have a lot of decisions that you have to make throughout the day. So, Mark Zuckerberg wears the same shirt and pants, so he has less decisions fatigue, right? Like this, so he has 100 of this one shirt or 100 of these one pair of pants. So he just walks in and he limits his decisions. And Jeff Bezos kind of talks about, I like to putter in the morning, right? And he likes to read the newspaper, have his cup of coffee, talk to his grandkids or kids or whatever, and then make sure that he's fully ready to make an optimal decision. And it's I forget the statement he actually says, but basically saying, I want to make more high quality decisions, or not more. I want to make less high quality decisions rather than more decisions in general of just like overbearing basically the amount that you have to do. That's your job as a CEO or founder, is to make the best quality decisions you can, and as few of them as possible, because the fewer quality decisions you do, the greater the impact technically should be on your company. And what you're describing to me is that we don't have the data, we don't have the throughput, we don't have the interconnectivity between these siloed softwares and data collecting points, from communications to finances to inventory to task management, in order to make those high quality decisions. And so basically that's the next frontier for, I would say, hospitality, is how do we get the best data pool set in order to make better, higher quality decisions rather than more decisions that lead into a spiral.
It's, it's beautifully put, right? Because it goes back to the consistency that you brought up at the beginning, which is, why do we probably see consistency decline as people increase their unit count? Well, because their hair is on fire with 70 different things that they need to try to figure out. And so to your point, they can't focus on the decisions that are providing them the greatest amount of return, that are ensuring that consistency scales over time, because they're putting out fires.
Yeah. 100%. And they're spread way too thin. And I honestly think a lot of property managers who have realized that they're paying over a third of their revenue to software and tech, they're kind of going, where is the customer service and hospitality for me? Like, why am I getting squeezed more and more and more? And to the point of like no profitability, like why is this business even worth it at some point? So that's a conversation I've been hearing a lot, right? Where tech is charging more especially as they raise more money to build more features and functionalities and things that most people probably don't need. And then they start, slowly again, fighting for pennies in order to just keep their business alive. So Benjamin, this has been quite the conversation. And I'm sure the listeners who are going to be getting to this point in the episode, they're going to be like, we need a part 2. Like, we need a part 2. That's immediately kind of what goes in my head. It's like, this is just scratching the surface. So I will put it out there. You're definitely invited back for a part 2, because you open up my brain and my mind to a lot more different areas of discussion. But I don't think I'm fully prepared for those topics. And so
we'll do another download call.
Yeah, 100%. And for the listeners, I think this is just a great moment to let them sit and reflect on this conversation, to look at the problems, look at the outcomes in their own businesses or in just the industry as general. But Ben, one of the questions I'd like to ask all my guests at the end is, if a listener truly loved what we got to discuss today and they want to reach out and connect with you more, what's the platform or link that you would like us to put in the show notes to ensure that people are able to find you easily?
Yeah, sure. I think probably I think LinkedIn's probably the easiest. There's a lot of spammy stuff going on in the other places where I think that'd be great. LinkedIn is just Benjamin M as in Mike Gross. LinkedIn /in Benjamin M Gross is my LinkedIn profile, and it's an easy way to find me.
I love it. Well, I'll make sure that all the links are in the show notes for our Slick Talkers out there who want to connect with you, learn more about Minty Living. I definitely recommend that they connect with Sidra as well, because she is just as amazing of a human being as you are. So want to give you both your flowers. But thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Seriously, incredible conversation, incredible way and perspective of thinking. Just my hat's off to you and the brand that you guys have built. It's incredible, and I'm excited to continue to watch and to continue the conversation moving forward, because it's an important one. So thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Will. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here. Thanks for the time today.
Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Wil Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week.